Welcome to Nightmare Fuel Stories. The lighthouse at Widow's Point. The sea was restless the day I arrived at Widow's Point Lighthouse. Waves crashed against the jagged rocks below, sending sprays of salt water high into the air. The sky hung heavy with dark clouds, threatening a storm that never seemed to arrive. Perfect weather for what I had in mind. I'm a marine historian, or that's what I tell people. In truth, I'm more of a collector of forgotten stories, especially those involving maritime mysteries. When I heard about the abandoned lighthouse at Widow's Point and the opportunity to stay there for research, I jumped at the chance. The local historical society had recently acquired the property and needed someone to document its condition before restoration began. What they didn't know was that I was far more interested in the lighthouse's dark history than its architectural features. "You sure about this, Mr. Thorne?" The caretaker, an elderly man named Elias, looked at me with concern as he handed over the heavy iron key. "Most folks don't last more than a night here." I smiled reassuringly. "I've stayed in worse places. Besides, I'll be too busy with my work to get spooked by old stories." Elias didn't return my smile. "It ain't stories that'll trouble you." He glanced up at the lighthouse, its white paint peeling to reveal the gray stone beneath. "It's what's true that'll get under your skin." "I'll be fine," I said, taking the key. 3 days is all I need. "Radio won't work out here," he warned. "Cell service neither. Town's 15 miles back." "If something happens," he trailed off, then shrugged. "Well, you signed the waiver." I had indeed. The Historical Society had been quite insistent about that. "The generator's full, should last your stay if you're conservative. Water pump works, but don't drink it without boiling. And Mr. Thorne," Elias fixed me with a penetrating stare, "don't go up to the lantern room after dark, not for any reason." I nodded, though I had every intention of ignoring that particular instruction. The lantern room was precisely where I planned to spend most of my time. After Elias left, I stood alone before the lighthouse, taking it in. Built in 1871, Widow's Point Lighthouse stood 112 feet tall, a solitary sentinel on this remote stretch of coastline. Its last keeper had vanished in 1988, and the Coast Guard had automated it shortly after. In 2012, after several unfortunate incidents, they decommissioned it entirely. Those incidents were what had drawn me here. I carried my equipment inside: camera, audio recorder, notebooks, and provisions for 3 days. The interior was just as I'd expected, damp, musty, and cold. A spiral staircase wound upward through the center of the tower, disappearing into darkness. The keeper's quarters on the ground level consisted of a small kitchen, a bedroom, and a study. Simple accommodations, but sufficient for my needs. I spent the afternoon setting up, placing my recording equipment strategically throughout the lighthouse. By the time evening fell, I was ready to begin my real work, the log books. From my backpack, I carefully removed the leather-bound journal I'd borrowed from the Maritime Museum archives. It was the personal log of Thomas Wickley, keeper of Widow's Point from 1923 to 1925. His official logs showed nothing unusual, but this private journal told a different story, one of strange sightings, unexplained sounds, and a growing paranoia. Wickley had been the first to document the phenomenon I'd come to study, but not the last. Over the decades, 7 keepers had reported similar experiences. 3 had committed suicide, 2 had disappeared. 1 had been committed to an asylum, and 1, the last, had simply walked into the ocean one night, according to witnesses in a passing ship. All had mentioned seeing vessels that shouldn't exist. I settled into the keeper's study with Wickley's journal, my own notebook, and a bottle of whiskey. Outside, the wind howled and waves pounded the rocks, perfect ambience for ghost stories. Wickley's entries began normally enough: weather reports, maintenance tasks, occasional complaints about the isolation. But 3 months in, the tone changed. April 17, 1923, spotted a 3-masted schooner approaching from the north at dusk. Signaled with the light but received no response. Vessel appeared to be listing badly. Radioed Coast Guard to report possible vessel in distress. They confirmed no ships in the area. When I looked again, the schooner was gone. Must have been a trick of the light. April 21, 1923, schooner sighted again, same position, same time. Got a better look through the telescope. Ship appears damaged, sails in tatters, no crew visible on deck. Coast Guard again reports no vessels in area. Am I seeing things? April 28, 1923, the schooner came closer tonight. Close enough to read her name, Isabella. Checked the registry. The Isabella sank in these waters in 1887. All hands lost. I closed the journal, a chill running down my spine despite the whiskey warming my blood. The first sighting. According to my research, every keeper who had documented the phenomenon had first seen the Isabella, followed by other vessels, all ships that had sunk in the vicinity of Widow's Point. I glanced at my watch, nearly midnight. Time to visit the lantern room. The spiral staircase creaked under my weight as I climbed, my flashlight casting long shadows on the curved walls. 147 steps to the top. I counted them as I went, a habit from childhood that surfaced whenever I was nervous. The lantern room was smaller than I'd imagined, dominated by the massive Fresnel lens in its center. Though no longer functional, the lens still gleamed in the beam of my flashlight, fracturing the light into countless shimmering patterns. The glass-paneled walls offered a 360-degree view of the darkness outside, broken only by the distant lights of ships far out at sea. I set up my camera on a tripod, pointing it northward, the direction from which the Isabella had always been reported to appear. Then I settled into the single chair, once occupied by generations of keepers during their long night watches, and I waited. The wind picked up as the night deepened, moaning around the lantern room like a living thing. Rain began to fall, pattering against the glass. I checked my watch, 2:17 a.m., the so-called dead hour when the veil between worlds was thinnest, according to folklore. Nothing appeared on the horizon. No ghostly ships, no supernatural phenomena, just darkness and rain and the occasional flash of lightning. I was beginning to think I'd wasted my time when I noticed something odd. The lights on the horizon, the ships I'd seen earlier, were gone, all of them. The shipping lane should have shown at least a few vessels, even at this hour. I lifted my binoculars, scanning the darkness. Nothing. Then I saw it. Not from the north, as I'd expected, but from the east. A faint light like a lantern bobbing on the waves. I adjusted my camera, zooming in as far as possible. It wasn't a lantern. It was a light shining through a porthole. As my eyes adjusted, I could make out the silhouette of a ship, a modern container vessel, massive and dark against the horizon. But something was wrong. It was listing severely to one side, and there were no running lights, just that single glow from within. I grabbed the marine radio I'd brought, though Elias had warned it wouldn't work. To my surprise, it crackled to life. "Mayday, mayday, mayday," I called. "This is Widow's Point Lighthouse. I am observing what appears to be a vessel in distress approximately 2 miles offshore, bearing 90 degrees. Over." Static answered me. I tried again with the same result. Then, through the static, I heard something. Not a response to my call, but what sounded like a fragment of another transmission. "Taking on water, position unknown, all systems failing." The voice was distorted, breaking up, but the fear in it was unmistakable. I pressed the transmit button again. "Vessel in distress, this is Widow's Point Lighthouse. Can you confirm your position and nature of your emergency?" Over. More static then. "Help us, we're sinking. The Meridian, the Meridian." The name struck a chord. I'd seen it recently in my research. I racked my brain, trying to remember. Then it hit me. The Meridian was a container ship that had gone down in a storm 5 years ago, less than 10 miles from this very spot. 28 crew members had been lost. I looked back through the glass. The ship was still there, listing badly now, the single light still glowing. As I watched, the vessel seemed to shudder, then began to sink, bow first. It happened with terrible slowness, the massive ship gradually disappearing beneath the waves until only the stern remained visible. Then that too was gone, and the sea was empty once more. I sat frozen in the chair, my heart pounding. Had I just witnessed the echo of a tragedy? Some kind of supernatural replay of the Meridian's final moments? The radio crackled again. ... "Cannot maintain. Going down, please." And then silence. I spent the rest of the night in the lantern room, watching the empty sea, the radio silent beside me. When dawn broke, gray and misty, I was still there, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. The sea looked normal in the daylight. Calm, almost peaceful. A few ships dotted the horizon, going about their business. No sign of the Meridian or any distress. I checked my camera. The recording showed nothing but darkness and rain. The ship hadn't appeared on film. I made my way down to the keeper's quarters, my legs stiff from sitting all night. I needed coffee, needed to think. What had I seen? Was it real, or had I fallen asleep and dreamed it? The kitchen was as I'd left it, except for one thing, a puddle of seawater on the floor, leading from the door to the sink. I followed the trail with my flashlight. It ended at the sink, where something gleamed in the drain. I reached in cautiously and pulled out a small object, a ship's pin, the kind officers wear on their uniforms. Engraved on it was a single word, Meridian. My hands shook as I placed the pin on the counter. It was real. Somehow, impossibly, it was real. I spent the day reviewing Wickley's journal and the other materials I'd brought, looking for patterns, explanations. According to the accounts, the phenomenon followed a progression. First, witnesses saw ships that had sunk in the past. Then they began to hear them, voices, distress calls, the sounds of vessels breaking apart. Finally, they would find objects, physical evidence that something had crossed from whatever realm these phantom ships inhabited into our own. The final stage, according to Wickley, was an invitation. June 12, 1923, they want me to join them. The crews of the lost ships, they call to me each night now, voices carrying over the water. They say there's a place for me among them, that I belong with them. God help me, I'm beginning to believe them. Wickley had resisted longer than most. He lasted nearly 2 years before walking into the sea one stormy night. His body was never recovered. As evening approached again, I felt a growing sense of dread. Part of me wanted to pack up and leave to forget this whole endeavor, but I couldn't, not when I was so close to understanding. I returned to the lantern room as darkness fell, setting up my equipment again. This time I brought Wickley's journal with me, along with the meridian pin. I placed the pin on the ledge before the glass, a talisman or an offering, I wasn't sure which. The night was clearer than the previous one, the sea calmer. A half-moon provided enough light to see the water stretching to the horizon. I waited, watching, my camera recording. At precisely 2:17 a.m., the same time as the previous night, the lights on the horizon began to disappear, one by one, until the sea was dark. Then they appeared, not one ship but many, materializing out of the darkness like ghosts taking form. I counted 7 vessels in all. The schooner Isabella was there, its tattered sails glowing with an eerie phosphorescence. Beside it was a steamship I recognized from my research as the Augusta, lost in 1912. Then came a fishing trawler, a Coast Guard cutter, a luxury yacht, a naval destroyer. And the Meridian, massive compared to the others, its hull breached and taking on water, yet somehow still afloat. They formed a semicircle around the lighthouse, as if waiting for what I didn't know. The radio crackled to life without my touching it. Through the static came voices, dozens of them, overlapping, some faint, others clear. The lighthouse keeper, he sees us, ... bring him to us. One of us now. I backed away from the radio, but the voices continued, growing louder, more insistent. The temperature in the lantern room plummeted, my breath fogging in the sudden cold. The meridian pin on the ledge began to vibrate, then spin, as if pulled by some invisible force. Outside, the phantom fleet drew closer to shore, impossibly navigating the treacherous rocks that had claimed so many real vessels. I could see figures now, standing on the decks, shadowy forms with indistinct features, all turned toward the lighthouse. Toward me, the radio voices merged into a single chorus, "Join us, keeper, join us." I grabbed my camera, desperate to document what was happening. Through the viewfinder I could see the ships clearly, could make out details invisible to my naked eye, the names on their hulls, the faces of the figures on their decks. Faces of the drowned, bloated and pale, seaweed tangled in their hair, empty eye sockets staring at me with terrible hunger. Something slammed against the glass of the lantern room, a hand pressed flat against the pane. It was followed by another and another until hands surrounded the room on all sides, pressing, pushing, as if trying to break through. Water began to seep in around the frames, not rain but seawater, briny and cold. The radio screamed now, "Join US." I ran for the stairs, nearly falling in my haste to escape. Behind me I heard glass shatter, felt a rush of cold air and spray. I didn't look back, just kept descending, counting the steps backward as I went. 147, 146, 145, something was following me down the stairs. I could hear it, a wet slapping sound like bare feet on stone, multiple sets of feet. 199, 98, the air grew thick with the smell of the sea, of rot and brine. Breathing became difficult, as if I were inhaling water instead of air. 50, 49, 48, they were getting closer. I could hear their breathing now, ragged, gurgling, the sound of lungs filled with seawater still trying to function. 10, 9, 8, almost there, the door to the keeper's quarters was just ahead. 3, 2, 1, I burst through the door, slamming it behind me and throwing the bolt. For a moment there was silence. Then the pounding began, fists hammering against the wood, voices calling my name, though I hadn't told anyone at the lighthouse who I was. "Daniel Thorne," they called. "Keeper Thorne, open the door." "Let us in." I backed away, looking frantically for a weapon, an escape route, anything. The windows were too small to climb through. The only exit was the front door, which would take me outside, toward the sea, toward them. The pounding stopped abruptly. In the sudden silence I heard a new sound, water, trickling under the door from the stairwell. It pooled on the floor, then began to flow toward me, as if with purpose. I retreated to the study, slamming and locking that door as well. My equipment was there, my camera from the previous day, my notes, Wickley's journal. I grabbed my satellite phone, the one modern luxury I'd allowed myself despite knowing it likely wouldn't work this far from civilization. To my surprise, it powered on. I dialed 911 with shaking fingers. A voice answered on the first ring, "Coast Guard emergency response." "Thank God," I gasped. "This is Daniel Thorne. I'm at Widow's Point Lighthouse. I need immediate evacuation. There's something here, something coming for me." "Mr. Thorne," the voice interrupted, suddenly familiar. "This is Captain Wells of the Meridian. We've been expecting your call." The phone slipped from my numb fingers. From beneath the door, seawater continued to flow in, rising now, an impossible amount that couldn't be coming just from the stairwell. It soaked my shoes, cold as death. I backed up until I hit the desk, then climbed on top of it as the water continued to rise. 3 inches 6, a foot. It shouldn't have been possible. The room was filling like a tank. In desperation, I grabbed Wickley's journal, flipping to the final entries, looking for anything that might help me understand what was happening, how to stop it. The last page contained only a single line, written in a shaky hand. They don't want a keeper, they want a witness. The water reached the desk, soaking the edges of my pants. I looked around wildly, then spotted my camera from the previous day, still set up on its tripod. I lunged for it, checking that it was still recording, then spoke directly into the lens. My name is Daniel Thorne. I came to Widow's Point Lighthouse to investigate reports of phantom ships. These reports are real. The ships are real. They appear to be vessels that have sunk in these waters, but they're something else, something that exists between worlds. They need witnesses to maintain their existence. Each keeper who succumbed became part of their crew, their collective memory. Now they want me. The water reached my waist, impossibly cold. From outside came the sound of ships' horns, mournful, beckoning. If you're watching this, do not come looking for me. Do not send anyone else to this lighthouse. Seal it up, destroy it if you have to, because they're waiting, always waiting for the next keeper, the next witness. Water at my chest now. The desk began to float, tipping me into the frigid brine. I held the camera above my head, still recording. They don't just want to be seen, they want to be remembered. That's their true power, memory. As long as someone remembers them, they exist. As long as the camera slipped from my grasp, plunging beneath the surface. I lunged for it, going under, the salt water burning my eyes. In the murky darkness, I saw them, faces surrounding me, hands reaching for me, pulling me deeper. I fought to the surface one last time, gasping for air. The water had nearly reached the ceiling. Only a few inches of space remained. Through the window, I could see the Phantom fleet waiting, their lights glowing in the darkness. They didn't want to harm me, I understood that now. They wanted to preserve me, to make me a part of their eternal voyage, a witness to their existence forever. As the water closed over my head for the final time, I heard their chorus again, no longer threatening but welcoming. One of us now, one of us forever. I let go of my resistance, allowed the cold to seep into my bones, my lungs to fill with water. There was no pain, only a strange sense of belonging, of purpose, the lighthouse keeper, the witness. The memory keeper. 3 days later, when Elias returned to check on me, he found the lighthouse empty. My equipment was there, my notes, my provisions, all untouched. But of me there was no trace, except for a puddle of seawater on the study floor and a single cryptic message written in my journal. The ships are waiting. I must bear witness. That night, for the first time in decades, the light in the lantern room of Widow's Point Lighthouse came on by itself, sweeping across the dark waters. And on the horizon, visible only to those who knew what to look for, a new ship joined the Phantom fleet, a small research vessel with a single figure standing at its bow. The keeper of Widow's Point, the custodian of lost memories, the witness to ships that shouldn't exist, me, forever.